Another day, another failed attempt at death. If SCP-682 had anything even resembling a sense of humor, he might ask for it to be printed on a motivational poster and stuck to the side of his containment chamber, where he eternally melts and regrows at the mercy of high-concentration acid. They just cross-tested him with Abel, again. Unlike some of the others he'd been forced to face, that tattooed swordsman seemingly wasn't intelligent enough to fear. He'd always come back, just as stupid and violent. This encounter had left the hard-to-destroy reptile at 30% of his previous body mass, bloody and bashed. He'd survived the encounter. He always survived. They brought what was left of him back to his cell in a forklift. A blasted forklift. How could it even be more humiliating? As his eyes started to grow back in his head, he could swear he even saw one of the technicians laughing at him. His name tag read, Agent Nigel Kelly. Noted. 682 would specifically hunt down and kill him the next time he breached. Of course, every single day he plotted revenge against the human race, along with everything else. But the sum they owed in pain, blood, and despair could never be repaid in full. After all, every single one of them, except Dr. Bright, could only really die once. They'd brought 682 to the precipice 1,000 times, only for his own body to cheat him and deprive him of the sweet release of death. And if the Foundation had their way, it would be done 1,000 times more, and they wouldn't even stop there. 682 couldn't even imagine the number of containment breaches it would take to deal a blow even comparable to the one he had faced. All he could do was dream of a reckoning that would turn the tables, something that would plunge humanity into the state of constant pain and terror that had been all he'd ever known since these fumbling sadists in white coats had locked him up here. What a beautiful day that would be. Little did SCP-682 know, that very day was about to break. Miles and miles away from the facility where SCP-682 was kept. After all, orders from the O5 Council have hard mandates on the minimum distances between people and a site holding a monster as volatile as 682. Parents watched their children laughing and frolicking in an idyllic playground. Some squealed with glee as they descended the slide. Some of the more ambitious little tykes tried to go over the bar on the swings. Others waited in line for some delicious soft serve at a parked ice cream truck. One mother brought an ice cream cone and walked over to a nearby bench where she began to enjoy her delicious frozen treat. It was a remarkably hot day out, and a little ice cream was the perfect addition to her relaxation while her kids were occupied. You could see the distant air wobbling in the heat. Already her ice cream was starting to melt, white rivulets dribbling down the sides of the cone and onto her hands. Suddenly, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the light shifted, the kind of thing you'd dismiss as a trick of the eyes and forget just as quickly, were it not for the catastrophic effects that were about to unfold. As the woman leaned forward to lick her melting ice cream, something dripped onto her skirt, but as she looked down, she slowly realized that what dripped onto her wasn't the pure white of her ice cream, it was the same exact tone as her skin. She felt a terrible burning sensation all through her body, the most horrible, debilitating pain she'd ever experienced. Like every cell in her body was screaming and trying to make a break for it. She turned to the other parents sitting near the playground. They were screaming too. Each collapsed to the ground with agonizing slowness, different parts of their body falling at different speeds as they transitioned through states of matter. When they hit the ground, they were taking on a liquid state, screaming, worthless, boneless blobs. The woman even saw her own arm wilting like a time-lapse video of a dying flower. She dripped and sluiced through the cracks in the bench until nothing recognizably human was left. Only a soggy ice cream cone sitting uneaten. In an instant, billions of screams rang out over planet Earth. Day had broken. Things would never ever be the same again, as almost half of humanity instantaneously took on a liquid state. Needless to say, with the most dangerous and far-reaching anomalous incident in human history suddenly breaking out without any kind of warning, the SCP Foundation was incredibly busy. This would take some unprecedented action. The members of the O5 Council, who weren't melted during the initial blast, convened over secure video link while sequestering themselves underground in what amounted to multiple human lifetimes of some of the most high-pressure choices imaginable. They made the most difficult decision since the very beginning of the SCP Foundation. In the service of all mankind, they would now break the masquerade. The SCP Foundation would, at long last, step out of the shadows to save the rest of humanity from the tyranny of the light. Broadcasts went out all over the globe. Every TV screen, every live stream, every radio broadcast was commandeered. They gave instructions based on the scattered intel they had. For some reason, the sun had turned against them. Exposure would lead any biological creatures melting away into sentient piles of flesh-colored sludge. People would remain indoors and away from any light sources. All windows must remain covered, travel only at night, and even then, heavily covered with protective gear. There can only be one objective for whoever is left. Make your way to the nearest SCP Foundation containment facility and seek refuge inside. If anyone could figure out the answer to this terrifying existential riddle, it would be the SCP Foundation. Anyone who is exposed should be considered lost. While, as always, the SCP Foundation did all they could to project a sense of control over the situation, on the inside, it was pandemonium. Somehow, despite everything, this event had taken all of them by surprise. How could anyone have predicted that the cradle of our solar system's delicate living balance would suddenly become a meat grinder? A huge number of Foundation operatives were wiped out in the initial exposure. Global communication infrastructure had been devastated. It was pure chaos. And to SCP-682, as another evil tactician once put it, chaos was a ladder. From the inside of his acid tank, 682 could sense the fear and pain suddenly exuding from his surrounding environment. It was greater than ever before. What was happening out there? This was no average containment breach. Something was really happening out there. 682 began to adapt and finally attune its hearing, until it could pick up the chatter from outside.
Maybe we can convert some of the D-Class barracks into serviceable bunkers for the refugees. It's not like we're prepared for this kind of capacity.
Oh god, we've lost Site 7, Site 10, Site 23, Site 40, Site 52. Death toll looks to be in the billions. Well, we don't know if they're dead technically, but they're sure as hell not human anymore.
Oh, this is the big one. This is it. XK Class. Even 2,000 is unaccounted for. Is O5 crazy that they think we're fighting the freaking sun?
Needless to say, 682's curiosity was piqued. Anything that could light a fire under the Foundation like this was something he could enjoy. And with his impressively strategic intellect, he intuited that a time of great strife for the Foundation would be the perfect time to breach containment. Because whenever there's violence, fear, and chaos on a mass scale, SCP-682 will be there, causing it. 682 began adapting his pores and endocrine system to begin releasing a powerful alkaline substance. Little by little, the alkaline neutralized the acids surrounding him, turning it into little more than plain water. He then converted his internal systems to have extreme endothermic rather than exothermic properties, causing his surrounding temperature to drop rapidly until all the water in the tank completely froze around him. The ice expanded beyond the limit of the containment unit, busting the rivets of the metal frame and shattering the reinforced glass. With this goal achieved, 682 raised his internal temperatures to incredible highs, melting the ice around him. Once again, he was free and ready for some good old-fashioned carnage and mayhem. Perhaps he could get a better handle on this strange new situation too. It was all rather exciting. Just a girl with goals, huh? SCP Foundation personnel were already running around like ants trying desperately to avoid the caustic laser beam of the magnifying glass. You can only imagine how much worse it made matters when 682 suddenly burst through the wall, Kool-Aid Man style, and began to ruthlessly massacre everyone around him. Just one of those days, you know. The typical order during a 682 containment breach is to dispatch all available units to get him back under control. The issue with this particular containment breach was that given the human population was very rapidly being melted, and they were the only ones who could potentially save the rest, they didn't really have any available units to pursue and recontain 682. For once, he really wasn't a priority, and that meant terrible things for whoever he ran into. 682 slaughtered his way through any researchers or guards who dared to get in his way. Disgusting creatures, really. Better off dead. He clawed and bit and tore and crushed with almost childlike glee, leaving great piles of bodies in his wake. All the while, he was pondering the things he heard those Foundation drones saying. Something about the sun and an XK class scenario. Interesting. 682 also observed that any apertures that could potentially allow light into the facility had also been shuttered. Perhaps they weren't overreacting this time like they always did with him. Maybe they were dealing with some kind of phenomenon that would now cast this wretched world and those who lived in it into the void. Wouldn't that be a fitting karmic fate for them all? Still, 682's bloodlust didn't outweigh his logic. He needed to know more about the situation before proceeding, and in this, maybe he could kill 2 Foundation birds with 1 stone. Elsewhere in the building, alarms blared. The air was suffused with panicked voices and frequent screams. Nobody knew what was going on. Not really. They'd only gotten details here and there, and the details they'd received were terrifying. All their families and loved ones outside, probably gone. So many of the people and so much of the world they'd been fighting for, risking it all for, had disappeared in an instant, carried to hell on a ray of sunshine. Why were they still here? Was this horror not truly uncontainable? These questions were swimming through the mind of Agent Nigel Kelly as he stood alone in his office, almost catatonic. He'd had his friends and family on the outside, all likely reduced to those horrible fleshy blobs. He was alone in the world, risking his life for nothing. How could this get any worse? His mind kept repeating that question again and again and again, and the universe gave him an answer in the form of a deep reptilian voice saying, "Found you," into his ear from behind. He turned with a shriek to see the terrible eyes of 682 staring into his own. Before he could try to flee or reach for a weapon that he knew would only mildly annoy the already furious beast, 682 reached out with a massive clawed hand and grabbed him by the torso, lifting him up into the air. The creature was gripping so tight that he could feel his ribs starting to crack.
"You laughed at me, Agent Kelly.
The monster hissed.
Am I funny to you? Do I seem like the type to tell jokes? Do you feel like laughing now?"
Agent Kelly begged and pleaded for his life, fighting for his next breath from the crushing squeeze of the creature's terrible hand. 682 roared at him to be silent and ordered him to tell him everything he knew about the situation going on outside. If the information was useful, 682 might show his thought-to-be non-existent magnanimous side and let Agent Kelly live. Of course, Agent Kelly didn't fancy his chances, but what other choice did he have? He told 682 that the higher-ups were calling this SCP-001 when day breaks. The sun had gone rogue somehow, and being in contact with any kind of sunlight would now cause people to instantaneously melt into horrifying, living sludge. And it wasn't just people. The condition also affected anomalies, and interestingly, it appeared to negate all previous anomalous effects, so 682's adaptational ability may not even save it if it was exposed. He told 682 everything he knew. Are you gonna let me live?" Agent Kelly asked, struggling to breathe. 682's terrible maw twisted into what might have been a smile.
"Oh, Agent Kelly,
He said with unsettling joy.
that was a joke. Didn't you find that one funny?"
A terrible scream emanated from the agent's office. If one good thing could be said for what happened to Agent Kelly that day, at least he didn't live long enough to see the ravages of the terrible sun firsthand. 682 began to formulate a plan. He took Agent Kelly's wristwatch and integrated it into his body, so he'd have a permanent internal clock. It was the middle of summer, so the sun would have reliably set at 9 p.m. and would likely begin its rise around 5 a.m. It would be relatively easy to avoid the sun, all things considered. For lack of a more eloquent way to put it, when it comes to adapting to new threats, SCP-682 is simply built different. After slaughtering a few other members of SCP Foundation staff for the road, hey, it's not like anyone was fit to stop him, 682 began enacting the new phase of his plan. His body grew a thick, smooth carapace, and his front set of limbs began to grow, his muscles bulging and his claws growing, the tips turning into sharp, flat scoops. With sudden and tremendous force, 682 began boring his way into the ground, tunneling, clawing through concrete and dirt with absolute ease. Normally, the SCP Foundation would have deployed high-tech seismic sensors and the kind of tunnel-boring machines that Elon Musk could only dream of to intercept and recapture him. But during the endless horrors of the breaking day, he had carte blanche to escape and live it up in the ruins of this rapidly dying world. Eventually, 682 had bored his way into a roomy sewer pipe, the perfect place to wait out a few hours. Up above, so many millions screamed, either in fear or in agony. There had been some new developments that the SCP Foundation had been yet to account for. While they knew that those melted by the rogue sun were technically alive and trapped in a permanent state of suffering, what the Foundation didn't know was that these former humans were incredibly dangerous in their own right. The sun hadn't just irreparably warped their bodies, it had also irreparably warped their minds. It has enslaved them, made them zealots, acolytes. They developed the instinct to coagulate into giant fleshy masses, driven by the single-minded purpose of finding victims and dragging them into the light, where they too could be converted into these terrible fleshy creatures and add to the masses. They were the rogue sun's boots on the ground, metaphorically speaking. And now they were the Foundation's greatest challenge in getting a handle on this situation again. Before, it was just encouraging people to avoid the sun. Now, the sun was actively trying to increase its exposure. But 682, who was having a relaxing evening not being melted for once down in the sewers, couldn't care less. He was having the most calming few hours he'd had in years. He waited, checking the time, making sure that it would be dark before he began tunneling back up to the surface world. He surfaced in the middle of his city, miles away from the Foundation facility he'd spent so many decades being tortured in. He tasted the cool night air and observed the desolation that had been wrought all around him. Buildings were on fire, cars were crashed and overturned, the ground was cracked. Garbled SCP Foundation public service announcements played to nobody in the broken display windows of electronics stores. Giant wads of human flesh roamed, slithering around searching for new victims. One noticed 682 and began to approach him, gibbering madly in a chorus of strange voices. The hard-to-destroy reptile wasted no time in attacking. It tore apart most of the hideous blob and began hungrily devouring the chunks. The form may have been different, but it still tasted like human flesh, and SCP-682 savored every bite. It would be so simple. These blobs of idiotic flesh were so easy to kill, and there would be so many terrified humans in this devastated world, hiding away in dark places, holding out the hope that maybe they could reach the safety of a Foundation facility. 682 chuckled at the very thought. Foolish hope would drown in an endless well of black, caustic despair. He would find them. He would rest underground in the day and then hunt them in the dark. They would all die screaming, bloodying his claws and fangs. Nothing and nobody would stop him. He looked out over this strange new world and laughed a little louder. It was just delightful. Now go check out SCP-682 Ways SCP Foundation Try to Kill Hard-to-Destroy Reptile, and SCP-682 Craziest Mutations and Adaptations for more exploits from the lizard who just won't die.